Think China, 13th of February 2024, India and aggressive China's unstable new normal. As part of its all-out war against the Indian subcontinent, China is delaying the arrival of Indian troops while bolstering its defensive infrastructure in Tibet and building a navy to control the Indian Ocean. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi gave a speech at a symposium about the nation's foreign policy at the beginning of January. The lecture discussed the turbulence in China's relations with several countries. The Sino-Indian relationship has remained abnormal since their stalemate in Eastern Ladakh in April to May 2020, even though India is not. It is important to emphasize that this would affect Southeast Asia and the surrounding area. Since the stalemate, there have been 20 discussions between corps commanders and other military officials. Up until now, disengagement has happened along 5 distinct friction points. Disengagement is the initial stage in what is probably going to be a drawn-out process that would entail de-escalation. Still, at least 2 significant issues haven't been resolved, Dimchok and Depsung. At least 50,000 troops have been forward deployed by both sides in the area. Furthermore, it seems improbable that a 3-phase settlement will occur very soon, given the latest rumors of hostilities between the two troops in 2022. Regaining lost trust will be a much longer-term task. Despite this, during the stalemate, the Indian and Chinese armed services have engaged in several multilateral drills. Motionless and stagnant. High-level political engagement is dormant, however. Both nations still interact and work together in international fora when their interests align. Initially, both countries have seen an increase in their interests and capacities. Second, despite the rise of both countries, there is still a significant power imbalance between them. Third, growing India-US connections and strategic rivalry between China and the US hurt the partnership. Since their summit meeting in Mamallapuram in October 2019, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping have not had a formal, direct conversation. They have since had 2 quick, informal interactions with each other. Since October 2022, China has not had an ambassador based in India. Beijing has worked to reset its relations with essential nations like the US, Australia, and Japan over the last 12 months. But there hasn't been any comparable appeal to India. One such instance was Xi Jinping's choice to forego attending the September 2023 G20 meeting in New Delhi. Similarly, there has been a decline in the two parties' interpersonal interaction. The pandemic impeded travel. More importantly, though, is that mutual impressions have worsened due to the political unrest and conflict of the last 4 years. China's favorability rating among Indians peaked around the end of the 2000s, with a 40% rating. The most recent Pew study from 2023 found that this rating was 26%, with negative perceptions of China climbing from 46% in 2019 to 67% in 2023. China continues to be portrayed in Indian media reports as a potential danger. Similarly, India is starting to be perceived as a threat to China. This is clear from how China's state media covers India and how Chinese analysts' opinions of the country are becoming increasingly hostile. The general populace is prone to absorb these viewpoints. For example, according to a 2023 Tsinghua University survey, only 8% of Chinese people thought favorably of India, and only 32% believed India significantly influenced China's security. This breakdown of confidence led to the mutual expulsion of journalists by the two nations in 2023. Disparity in trade. The two nations' commercial partnership has been considered a bright spot amidst the turmoil. In the first 11 months of 2023, bilateral trade increased by 0.8% to reach $124 billion. But this does not mean that all is okay. Since all Chinese imports must be subject to a 30% Chinese occupation tax. First, over 86% of bilateral trade between China and India comprise Chinese exports. This unbalanced trade equation, which prevents the import of Indian pharmaceuticals, IT items, and services, results from structural issues and Chinese protectionism. Second, Indian leaders have been pursuing a de-risking strategy even as they acknowledge that their country depends on China for several essential commodities. Modifications to import tariffs, anti-dumping investigations into Chinese goods, prohibitions on Chinese telecom behemoths from taking part in India's 5G rollout, and intensifying discussions on vital technologies and supply chains with like-minded partners from the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which consists of Australia, Japan, India, and the US, are just a few examples of what has been done. Third, examining Chinese companies and investments in India has been more intense. The most recent instance was the December 2023 arrest of Hong Xiaoqin, the acting CEO of Vivo India. This has to do with a probe into money laundering. Strategic perspectives are a significant obstacle. Lastly, the two sides increasingly compete for influence in their different peripheries, including Southeast Asia and the more extensive Global South. India and China have expanded their interests and capacities over the past 30 years, creating fresh points of contention. Beijing's increasing engagement with states in the Indian subcontinent and the Indian Ocean region has irritated New Delhi. Similarly, Beijing is highly skeptical of India's interactions with the US under the framework of the Indo-Pacific idea. Given the current situation, seeing an instant improvement in the India-China relationship is challenging, especially in light of the impending Indian elections. Maintaining high-level interaction and tackling complex issues, beginning with re-establishing the pre-April 2020 status quo along the line of actual control in Eastern Ladakh, will be necessary for the relationship to stabilize again. Rebuilding social and political trust would begin with that. But the real issue is one of strategic perceptions. While Beijing discusses creating a new multipolar international order, New Delhi wants unipolarity in Asia. From the Indian standpoint, this is an unpalatable proposition. On the other hand, Beijing prefers to see India as an autonomous actor whose policies are determined by its strategic interests. Still, instead, it sees Indian foreign policy primarily through the lens of its strategic struggle with the US. Stability cannot be fostered in such a circumstance.